There's something fascinating about the beginning of a story when it starts with nothing, no safety net, no inherited empire. Just a vision, blurry maybe, but persistent, and a will that refuses to stay small. Elon Musk's journey didn't start in luxury or ease. It started in South Africa with a boy who didn't quite fit in, who often found comfort in books more than people, and whose mind wandered far beyond what was immediately visible. Jack, what makes this early stage remarkable isn't just the hardship. Many people experience hardship, but what he chose to do with it. Musk didn't just escape into fantasy, he absorbed knowledge like oxygen. At a young age, he devoured the entire Encyclopedia Britannica, not for school, but for curiosity, because he believed that understanding the world was the first step in changing it. That belief may sound idealistic, but it was the seed that shaped everything that followed. Too often, we wait for ideal conditions to begin our journeys. We say things like, when I have enough money, or once I know exactly what to do, or I'm not ready yet. But Musk began with uncertainty as a companion. He didn't wait to be fully equipped. He taught himself how to code. He built his first video game at Sure and sold it, not because someone told him to, but because he believed if something doesn't exist, maybe you're the one meant to create it. And when he moved to North America, he didn't arrive with power or privilege. He arrived with the same thing he always had: questions and the hunger to solve them. He studied physics and economics not because they were popular, but because they explained how the world worked and how it might be made better. What we often overlook in success stories is the silence at the start, the years of working in the dark before anyone is watching. Elon Musk didn't become Elon Musk overnight. Before Tesla and SpaceX, there were long hours, strange looks, failures, doors that wouldn't open, and yes, deep uncertainty. But he had already made peace with discomfort, because in his view, comfort was never the goal. Impact was. And this is where the philosophical depth begins to emerge. When you're building from nothing, you must ask better questions. Musk is known not just for intelligence, but for what's called first principles thinking, reducing problems to their most basic truths and reasoning up from there. It's a way of seeing clearly when the world is full of assumptions. For example, instead of asking, why are rockets so expensive, he asked, what are rockets made of? When he realized the raw materials cost far less than the finished product, the answer was obvious: build it yourself. Cranes, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. This mindset of starting from zero and still choosing to build is one we can all adopt. It doesn't require genius, it requires discipline, it requires detachment from excuses. It requires the humility to learn and the courage to fail. Elon didn't wait for validation. He moved toward the unknown again and again. And here's what's deeply human about that. We all start from zero in some area of our lives. Whether it's career, healing from pain, rediscovering purpose, or starting a new chapter, there's always a blank page. The difference lies in whether we treat that blank page as a barrier or as possibility. Musk treated zero not as emptiness, but as creative potential. B. So the real lesson in this first key point, humble beginnings and unshakable vision, is not just that he started small. It's that he never let being small define what was possible. Wrote vision isn't about predicting the future. It's about choosing to build the future, even when nothing around you says it can be done. His early days weren't glamorous. He shared a small apartment, slept on the floor, coded through the night, and showered at the YMCA. These are not billionaire luxuries. These are sacrifices made when the outcome is uncertain, but the mission is sacred. You don't get to SpaceX without surviving zero. You don't get to change the world without first enduring the silence of it ignoring you. But what kept him going was not the hope of applause. It was the clarity of why he was doing it. And that's what I want you to take with you today. Don't romanticize the destination and overlook the discipline of beginning. Your zero is not your end, it's your invitation. So ask yourself not when will things be easier, but how committed are you even when they're not? Because zero is where ideas are born, character is forged, and vision becomes visible to you first and eventually to the world. Brian, remember this. You don't need to start big. You just need to start real. And if your why is strong enough, the how will eventually find you. If you really want to understand how Elon Musk built what he built, you can't just look at the results. You have to look at how he thinks, because that's where everything begins. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary lies in mindset, and Elon doesn't just think outside the box. For him, the box never existed. Most people are trained to follow rules. School, society, culture, they condition us to think within predefined limits. We're taught what's realistic, what's possible, what's acceptable, and after years of repetition, those limits become unconscious. We stop questioning, we stop imagining, we confuse convention with truth. But Musk challenges that, not because he wants to rebel, but because he refuses to accept boundaries that were never based on first principles. This idea of first principles thinking is at the core of how Elon solves problems. It's not just about thinking differently, it's about thinking from scratch, deconstructing assumptions until you're left with raw, undeniable facts. And from those facts, you build up again, logically, creatively, relentlessly. When people said electric cars could never work at scale, Elon didn't ask, why hasn't it worked before? He asked, what's actually required for it to work? Batteries, efficiency, manufacturing, distribution. He didn't copy, he reimagined. When he started SpaceX, he didn't start by comparing launch costs. He started by asking, what are the materials that make up a rocket? Then he asked, how much do those materials actually cost on the open market? What he found was that the price of a rocket was massively inflated, not because of physics, but because of outdated systems and assumptions. And so he built his own because he didn't see limits, he saw inefficiencies, and he was willing to challenge them. This is the psychological leap most people never take, not because they can't, but because they're afraid. Afraid of being wrong, afraid of starting over, afraid of stepping outside the narrative they've inherited. But Elon's mindset is built on discomfort. He doesn't avoid it, he looks for it, because that's where real innovation lives. There's something else here too, a deeper layer. Musk doesn't just think bigger, he thinks forward. Most people think based on memory, past experiences, familiar references. Elon thinks based on possibility, what could exist, not just what has existed. That's why he can imagine Mars as a viable option, not because it's easy, not because it's likely, but because it's necessary. To him, stagnation is more dangerous than failure. Remaining the same is more terrifying than taking the risk to evolve. And that mindset, it's transferable. You don't need to be a physicist or a billionaire to think like this. You just need to ask better questions. You need to be willing to unlearn, to break down what you've been told and rebuild a version of reality that aligns with your vision, not someone else's. That's what Musk has done his entire life, not out of arrogance, but out of curiosity. He questions not to prove people wrong, but to understand what's true. There's a kind of mental stamina that comes with this way of thinking, because when you go against the grain, you will be misunderstood, you will be mocked, You will be doubted, sometimes even by the people closest to you. Elon has faced all of that. Journalists ridiculed him, investors pulled out, experts said he was delusional, and still he moved forward. Because when your thoughts are anchored in clarity, you don't need permission to pursue them. You just need the discipline to keep going. This is where mindset meets mission. Thinking differently isn't enough. You have to act on it, and that action requires resilience. Because the path of innovation isn't paved, you have to build it while walking it. There are no maps for what hasn't been done, only a compass, and that compass is your own internal conviction. Your belief that the way things are isn't the way they have to be. That's what drives SpaceX. It's not just a company, it's a question. What if we're capable of more? What if human life isn't meant to stay confined to one planet? What if we can solve problems not with fear but with imagination? These questions don't belong to Elon Musk alone. They belong to all of us. Because the future isn't something we wait for, it's something we create. And the tools to create it, curiosity, courage, clarity, are already within us. We just need to use them. So whatever you're facing right now, a challenge, a limitation, a barrier, ask yourself, is this a real boundary or just an outdated belief? What would happen if I stopped accepting the world as it is and started questioning what it could be? Binarance, because the future doesn't change when the world gives you permission. It changes the moment you decide to think beyond it. Let's talk about risk, not the theoretical kind people debate in boardrooms, but the kind that keeps you awake at night, wondering if you've made a mistake that could cost you everything. Elon Musk didn't just take risks, he bet his entire existence on the edge of uncertainty. And not once, multiple times. Most people call that reckless, but there's a difference between gambling and calculated sacrifice. Elon's approach to risk is a masterclass in conviction and purpose. After selling PayPal, Elon could have taken the safe route, retire early, invest in predictable ventures, live a comfortable, low-friction life. But that's not how he's wired. Comfort doesn't motivate him. Purpose does. So what does he do? He pours nearly all of his earnings into ventures that experts labeled as doomed. Electric cars, private rockets, solar energy. At the time, these weren't smart bets. They were long shots, laughable even. But that's the point. If the goal is safety, you'll never change the world. Because the world doesn't shift from playing it safe. It shifts from people who are willing to walk into chaos with their eyes wide open. Here's the key. Elon didn't take risk for the sake of ego. He took risk because he believed in something that didn't exist yet. And belief like that requires more than optimism. It requires endurance, psychological, emotional, financial. In Artsendling Ba, both Tesla and SpaceX were on the brink of collapse. Tesla was bleeding money, and SpaceX had failed 3 rocket launches in a row. One more failure would have shut the company down permanently. At the same time, the financial crisis had devastated the global economy. Investors backed off. Critics sharpened their knives. Elon was days away from everything, and still he didn't stop. That's not delusion. That's a kind of clarity most people never reach, the clarity dot. That comes when your vision matters more than your comfort. Elon once said, "I'd rather be optimistic and wrong than pessimistic and right." That's a statement of pure risk tolerance. Not blind faith, but courageous action in the face of overwhelming doubt. Most people think about failure as something to avoid. Elon sees it as essential feedback. Every failed rocket, every production setback, every PR disaster, they weren't signs to quit. They were lessons. He absorbed the pain, recalibrated, and kept going. That's the difference between those who make history and those who watch from the sidelines. It's not about avoiding failure, it's about outlasting it. This mindset isn't exclusive to him. It's available to anyone. But here's the catch: you have to be willing to lose. Not just financially, you have to be willing to lose approval, certainty, predictability. That's the trade. Most people want breakthrough results without breakthrough sacrifices, but the two are inseparable. If you want to build something extraordinary, you have to be willing to go to war for it, even if that war is internal. Yeah, Elon has said many times that building companies like SpaceX or Tesla felt like eating glass and staring into the abyss. That's not poetic exaggeration, that's emotional truth. It's the mental state of someone who's walking through fire not because they enjoy suffering, but because they believe the destination is worth the burn. And that belief, it's not emotional fluff, it's strategic necessity. Because when you're betting everything, the only thing that keeps you standing is conviction, not fake confidence, not surface level motivation, deep tested, bone level conviction, the kind that survives failure, fatigue, and fear. Elon didn't survive the darkest years of Tesla and SpaceX by being smarter than everyone else. He survived because he refused to give up. We have to ask ourselves, what would we do if we stopped fearing risk? What ideas would we launch? What boundaries would we push? What truths would we finally speak? Because the reality is, the future doesn't wait for permission. It moves with the people who are brave enough to lead it, and leadership doesn't always look glamorous. Sometimes it looks like sleeping on a factory floor. Sometimes it looks like being ridiculed in the press. Sometimes it looks like having everything fall apart and still showing up the next morning. That's not failure. That's formation. So whether you're building a company, healing from pain, or starting over in some area of your life, the question isn't whether risk is involved. The question is whether you're willing to be uncomfortable for something you believe in. If the answer is yes, then you're already halfway there. Because in the end, it's not the safe path that builds the future. It's the one lit by fire, walked by the few who dare to risk it all for something bigger than themselves. Let's talk about legacy, not the kind that's written on tombstones or carved into awards, but the kind that shapes the future long after you're gone. Elon Musk isn't just building companies, he's building a future. And that future is rooted in something bigger than profit, status, or popularity. It's rooted in purpose, a deep driving sense that life isn't just about surviving, it's about expanding, evolving, and creating something meaningful with the time we're given. When you look at the work Elon does, whether it's Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, or Starlink, they all revolve around one core idea: pushing humanity forward. Not slightly, radically. He could have stopped at one company. He could have picked the safest bet, maximized returns, and spent the rest of his life in luxury. But that's not what drives him. The motivation is never just money. It's mission. It's legacy at a planetary, even interplanetary scale. And here's what's remarkable. That mission comes with pressure most of us can barely imagine. Building a car company alone is considered one of the hardest industries to break into. Building a private space company? Nearly impossible. Combining both, unthinkable. And yet, he chose to do it. Not because it was easy, not because it was smart in a conventional sense, but because it mattered. You see, for Elon, the question isn't what can I do to succeed? It's what needs to be done for humanity to thrive, and how can I help make that happen? That question, that North Star, is what keeps him going through failure, ridicule, and exhaustion. It's what kept him going when Tesla was on the edge of bankruptcy. It's what kept him pushing SpaceX when rocket after rocket exploded on the launch pad. He wasn't just building products, he was solving problems that matter on a global scale: climate change, interplanetary survival, equitable access to information. It's not a business strategy, it's a life strategy. And this is where the shift happens. Where will happen because most people are chasing success. Elon is chasing significance. And there's a massive difference between the two. Success is about what you can gain. Significance is about what you can give. Success is often short-lived, a high that fades with time, but significance leaves ripples that last for generations. To live like that, though, to lead with purpose instead of ego, it takes courage, because it means you have to make decisions most people won't understand. It means choosing long-term impact over short-term applause. It means being willing to look foolish now for the sake of a better tomorrow. Elon has done this repeatedly. He's been criticized, mocked, underestimated, and still he moved forward because his decisions are anchored in a vision that extends far beyond his lifetime. That's the philosophical depth of his leadership. It's not just about innovation, it's about responsibility. If you have the knowledge, the resources, and the will to make a difference, do you have the duty to act on it? For Elon, the answer is yes. That's why he works botsir to EBIT hours a week. That's why he reinvests when others would cash out.